All right, I'd like to call to order the June 9th, 2025 Mountlake Terrace Planning Commission meeting to order. Would you please take the roll?
Chair Batista.
Here.
Vice Chair Betcher.
Present.
Commissioner Stenson.
Present.
Commissioner Wu.
Present.
Please note that Commissioners Thompson and Morgan are currently not here, and Commissioner Landis has requested an excused absence for tonight.
Would anybody like to make a motion to excuse Commissioner Landis?
Motion to excuse Commissioner Landis from tonight's meeting.
Motion? Do I have a second?
Motion seconded.
All right, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. All right, item number 3, approval of the May 27th, 2025 meeting minutes. Does anybody have any changes or corrections to those? Not hearing or seeing any, so we'll go ahead and accept those as presented. Item number 4, public comment. Let the record show there is no public in attendance tonight. Do we have anybody who has signed up to speak online?
No one has requested to speak online, nor has anybody submitted things to be read.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 5, presentation on commute trip reduction plan.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commission. I'm going to have to, how do I, let's see, where's my plan? I thought it was just up here. How do I pull up the plan? Sorry. Oh, here we go. Maybe this, I got it.
Got it?
Sorry.
Okay.
All right. And then let's do that. All right. Yeah, good afternoon. Oh, sure, that's, let's see, oops. How do I go back to share? Escape. And share should be at the bottom. Oh, no, up here?
You do it through Zoom.
Oh, up there, right?
Oh, down there, Zoom.
All right, gotcha.
You're going to go there, click it,
Click here?
and then you're going to go to...
Oh, there. And then I'm going to go to here.
Exactly.
Share. And then I'm going to go there. Okay. All right. Good afternoon. Thanks. My name's John Merrick. I'm the traffic engineer for Mountlake Terrace, working in Public Works. And tonight I'm going to be talking about the update to the commute trip reduction plan. This is the 25-29 commute trip reduction plan. The purpose of my presentation is really just provide an overview. I think in your packet you have copies of the draft plan along with a copy of the draft ordinance and interlocal agreement. So I'll just give kind of like a very broad overview of the plan for discussion purposes and input that you have. Talk a little bit about the renewal for the interlocal agreement, the ILA with community transit. And then ultimately, this is kind of the setup for, I'll be presenting to the council, city council later this week. And then towards the end of the month on the 26th, hoping to put this before the council again with a public hearing and ultimate adoption of the plan. Sorry. Keep an update. The commute trip reduction plan is consistent with city council goals, and particularly responsible governance to ensure desired level of service and environmental sustainability and resiliency. The plan is needs to be adopted by ordinance. So the last time I think there was any kind of legislative history on this was the adoption in 2017 of the 2017-2019 plan. I believe the intent was that the plan would be updated in 2020, but COVID hit, and so everyone's commute patterns changed dramatically. And so it's been, the updates have been postponed until now as we're getting more back into more formalized updated commute patterns, time to update the plan. So. Purpose of the commute trip reduction plan. The plan really just outlines the city's policies and strategies to improve air quality and reduce traffic congestion through employer-based transportation programs with the ultimate goal of reducing drive-alone trips. It's part of the Washington State's Commute Trip Reduction Act and is required, the city is required by law to develop, manage, and administer the plan. As I mentioned before, it's adopted, it ultimately is adopted by ordinance, and then it'll be incorporated into our municipal code. And it just replaces the current, we have a commute trip reduction plan, so it replaces the current plan. Once again, the primary goals of the plan are to reduce congestion and reduce carbon emissions. The requirements of the plan really apply to affected employers only. And then affected employers are those employers that have 100 or more full-time employees arriving between 6 and 9 in the morning. But it can also apply to employers can voluntarily opt in. So if you don't have 100 employees, but you can still voluntarily opt into the commute trip reduction plan. Currently, Mountlake Terrace only has one employer that meets that criteria, and that's Primera. And they have they already have a pretty robust commute trip reduction plan. But as the governing agency and administering the plan, City of Mountlake Terrace also has to meet the requirements of the plan as well. So it's basically the two of us. Plan development. So the update for this plan was really led by community transit. We currently have an interlocal agreement with community transit in 7 other cities in Snohomish County that establishes community transit as kind of like the lead. So they provide coordination, management, and administrative help with the commute trip reduction plans for those eight cities. And so they really led the effort for updating the plan. So they provided templates, information for the cities to use for their update to help ensure that it met the state of Washington's requirements for the plan. So Washington State had very specific requirements about types of material, types of elements they wanted to incorporate it into the plan. So having community transit provide some of those templates helped us ensure that we were meeting those requirements. They also took the lead in outreach, community outreach. So they hosted 2 online open houses last summer, reaching out to affected employers across Snohomish County, not just in Mountlake Terrace, and getting some feedback about what was working for them and what wasn't. And then and Primera actually attended those open houses, and then using that input to kind of help guide some of the direction that was put into the plan. So open houses, workshop. On top of that, the city currently we have the draft plan posted on our website with a survey that residents can take, or if you work in Mountlake Terrace and click on the plan, you can take the survey. It provides a little information about who you are, how you commute to work, if there's some elements, specific elements in the plan that you support or not. So, and then for outreach, the last part is even though I know Primera had participated in some of the workshops and open houses, once we kind of had our draft plan, I reached out specifically to them, gave them with a copy of the draft plan, asked for input if they had any concerns about the direction it was taking. Because they have such a robust commute trip reduction plan, they felt pretty comfortable with the update. When looking at the plan, it's consistent with the state's goals. So with the state commute trip reduction plan, they really are focusing on increasing the use of high efficiency transportation options for commuters. So really, kind of reducing those drive alone trips. And then their goals are also to be kind of responsive to the legislative direction for the advancement of environmental justice. And really, it's looking at how do we help meet our environmental goals for the state. The state's ultimate target is looking at, if you were to take the average of the drive-alone trips for all the cities, for those affected employers, is a 60% drive alone rate by June 2029. So those are the state's goals. They also provide some specific targets for the various cities. So for Mountlake Terrace, we have our goal is a 63% drive alone rate for affected sites by 2029. It's interesting because they established that target. We'll be establishing a new baseline of kind of where we're kind of measuring from with the 2023-2025 CTR survey. So that'll establish a new baseline since things kind of shifted dramatically. The 63% was established based on the 2019 survey. And like I said, since commute patterns changed dramatically over the following years, we're looking at the 23-25 to kind of establish a new baseline. And then we'll measure our progress based on the 2025-2027 survey that will go out. So the plan, it kind of boils down basically to requirements that affected employers have to, things that they have to implement as part of their plan. So first is they have to develop a CTR program, a commute trip reduction program. And that includes designating someone, and it can be more than one person, to be the employee transportation coordinator. That ETC or that coordinator then ensures that they're responding to the various surveys that are required throughout the year. They're providing information to employees. They're ensuring that the various measures are implemented. So they're like the main contact for affected employers that agencies, whether that's us or community transit, can reach out to provide get information back from them about how they're doing. So they're also responsible for, like say, distributing that information to employees, for reviewing or collecting the commute data on how employees are getting to work, and then reporting on that progress. Employers are required to implement a series of measures to achieve their goals. The measures can be broken down into 3 prime categories. The first is commuting support and incentives. These are things like subsidizing or providing free transit passes for employees, providing an option for pre-tax dollars that employees can use for van pool or carpool expenses, provisions providing subsidies for carpooling and van pooling, and then providing options for telework options for commute or telework options, or a compressed work schedule. Those are just some of the in that category. The other category is another category is information and education. This includes things like providing commute options and information when employees first come on, like for new hires. So when they first come on, what are the options that that employer provides? Providing information on commute options and resources, displaying those in common areas at the workplace, or providing that information online that employees can access via a mobile app. It also can include outreach efforts, conducting once a year outreach efforts that promoting bike to work or pedestrian options. So the last category is amenities and infrastructure, and this is providing items or infrastructure that helps provide incentives or support those employees that want to use other options. So it's making sure you've got a place to lock up your bike, showers, bike lockers. It could also include providing preferential parking for carpools and van pools, so it's easy to find a place to park, or providing and maintaining electric vehicle and charging stations. So those are the kind of that gives you a sense of the types of measures that employers have to implement. One of the biggest changes from the 2017-2019 plan to the current plan is previously it had kind of similar measures, That's grown from about 15 measures to choose from to 24. And it requires that employers choose at least 5, one from each of those categories. The previous plan, the 2017 plan, it still had many of those those measures, but it didn't have any type of, it didn't require you to do a certain amount. It just said implement some of these. And it didn't have the broad category of like trying to get a diverse group of measures that you're implementing. So that's probably the biggest change. One other change that we had kind of considered, but I think we're not ready to implement, is adopting a commuter benefit ordinance. This would require employers with 20 or more employees in the city that commute between that 6 to 9 hour to provide an opportunity for employees to put aside pre-tax dollars that they could use for transportation alternatives, so transit passes, carpools, van pools, or they could partially or wholly subsidize a transit pass. We talked about that, and I believe Seattle currently has a commuter ordinance. Some of the jurisdictions were considering that. I think we kind of thought, we haven't had a chance to like fully vet that, so we want to do some outreach to some of those employers in the city that would be impacted by that, see what type of input or questions or concerns they may have before we look at that. So rather than incorporate it into this update, we're looking to possibly incorporate that into the next update, which would be 2029, 2030. But by that time, we'll have had a chance to kind of really vet it out and see what kind of impact that would have. So that's kind of the overview of the commute trip reduction plan. The other piece to this is the interlocal agreement with community transit. Like I said, we currently have an interlocal agreement with them. It expires this year, actually it expires this month. So part of the commute trip reduction plan update is updating that interlocal agreement as well. So, and once again, it would be us with community transit and 7 other jurisdictions. And what that provides is it allows them to kind of administer kind of those surveys, provide a lot of that material to affected employers that they can use to distribute to their employees. So brochures, flyers, sometimes it's swag that we can get from community transit that we can use to help encourage or incentivize our employees to look at other options. The way the interlocal agreement is funded is WashDOT provides cities with we get about $15,000 a year for administering a commute trip reduction program. So community transit as part of this interlocal agreement, those funds are really directed right to community transit, and they provide that oversight and that information and coordination with the other jurisdictions. So, and updating or renewing that agreement, there really is no additional financial obligation that, above what we're already currently doing. So, okay. So the really next steps is just to finalize the plan. You have a copy of the draft plan. Hopefully I can answer any questions you might have about that, take input. I'm looking at the responses we're getting from the online posting of the site, so we'll incorporate any kind of last changes we want to make. That will eventually go into the final plan, which gets presented to the council at the public hearing for adoption. Once that's adopted, we would renew our local agreement with community transit and then update the code. And then we'll continue our outreach for that last piece for the future update. So our staff recommendation currently is the planning commission. It would be great if you could support the update to the plan and send a recommendation to the council to approve the plan. But before that portion, I'd just like to open it up for discussion and answer any questions you may have.
So I have a couple of questions. when it comes to the employee threshold, you said that only Primera hits that threshold. So, I think I've thought about this in the past too. The school district in whole has a lot of employees in the city, but they're not all in one location.
Yeah.
So that doesn't apply to the school
Doesn't,
district?
it's at one specific site.
Okay. And then.
And let me just, if, like, Primera has like multiple buildings, but it's kind of one campus. So, for the city, we have the police department and city hall, but it's kind of it's one campus. Fire department, because that's not city, that's county, doesn't apply, same with the library. But so if they have a campus, then it's that campus. But with the school district, they're spread apart, so they would not apply.
Gotcha. And so that's actually kind of sort of answers my second question then, which was that the city as an employer doesn't meet that 100 threshold.
We don't, but because we are the administrating body and we're the city agency, we are required to meet our own requirements.
And then it sounds like with the next update, with it being lowered to 20
If we choose to do
employees,
that.
that would then cover
Yeah.
all those school district sites, the city, plus a lot of other locations?
I believe, yeah, but particularly like the school district, for the school district, because I think most of those sites would have at least 20. Now, the other key to remember is that it's 20 that are arriving during that 6 to 9 period.
Which for school is probably,
Well, it's hard to say, I think, most schools are starting before that time. So if you're looking at all your teachers and your administrators and things like that, they are. But they probably do have some staff that might be arriving later than that. But, so, yeah, they would be potentially included in that.
okay.
But that's what we're doing. So right now I've got a list, I'm trying to do some outreach to specific employers that I think meet that threshold. But actually, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I don't think the school district was on that. So that would be, I would like to reach out to the school district and kind of let them know that's something we're thinking of. So the city of Edmonds, I believe, is also considering that. They're one of the 8 that in this interlocal agreement, they're going through the same process of updating their commute trip reduction. So that's something I can touch base with them as well about whether they've looked into that and how that would impact the district.
Okay. Anybody else?
Do you find that 6 to 9 time slot aligns with where we actually see peaky traffic problems?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the volumes in the city, if you were to look at kind of the volumes by time of day, we still see that big increase between that 6 to 9 hour, and then it tends to taper off. You get a little spike at kind of the noon hour a lot of times on a lot of our streets, and then the 4 to 6 hours that last peak period. But I think part of the thought is if you can shift that morning commute specifically, you're also shifting that evening commute, right? You're looking at another alternative.
Yeah. Yeah. Does that align with what we find with I don't know, maybe it's like spot load or something where we have school backups and things like that?
For us, probably. I mean, really, since we only have. I want to make sure I understand your question. Are you asking, does the 6 to 9 align with where we see congestion? I'm sorry. Maybe if you could restate your question, maybe I.
Sure. Sorry. So one of the, there's multiple sources of traffic that happen, and a lot of them kind of dovetail around that time. But, some of these, there's some sources that doesn't really cover. And one of the big ones that I've heard complaints about is school traffic, pick up and drop off lines and things like that. This wouldn't cover that.
This wouldn't, because a lot of the, in particular for, where I think I've heard the most issue is with the high school in general. And because that's not staff, a lot of that is students coming in. That is definitely something I want to work with the high school on, is looking to see if we can come up with a different drop-off, or, drop-off in particular. That morning arrival in particular is a bit problematic, but I think that's something, the commute trip reduction plan is will not have an impact on that. But that is something I think we need to look at. Is there a way we can work with the school district to change how they do that morning operation so that's less impactful on the street?
Yeah, I wouldn't encourage us to overload something that we need to do for mandatory compliance, but that is, these kind of questions I think are important to ask. I don't know what the appropriate venue is to address them, but I think we should.
Something we want to kind of move towards and working on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
What happens if a company doesn't do this, or they, do it badly? Do you just get an angry letter from the state, or are there incentives?
Yeah, it's mostly, there's no punitive measures, they're not fined, but it's just reaching out to them and through encouragement. So, there really isn't like I say, a fine or punitive effort. It'd just be more continued outreach and encouragement to work with them on why they aren't able to make that meet.
Okay, and there's not really an incentive for them either, other than you have to have somebody designated. You don't get candies from the state or something, right? There's not.
No. There again, I think it's trying to work with employers and help them see kind of the purpose and of the goals, right? I'm not aware of any state. There's no benefit they get. They're now eligible for certain type of funding if they comply with these that I'm aware of. So I suppose there could be an opportunity if a school district or employer, typically they don't go for that type of grant funding. They're not eligible for that. So
yeah, that's a shame, because one of the questions I do have, sort of one of the larger scale questions I have on this is, we are kind of, in the comprehensive plan process and the zoning, looking at, maybe requiring things like bike parking or, that's the one I can think of. But if there's some way to have that roll in with something that advantages companies, especially if we're looking at maybe expanding it to a smaller level of company. I think that would be a selling point for the city and its business community.
Well, and that's a really good point. And I think the way that element works its way into the plan is, the commute trip reduction plan is really consistent with the comp plan. And one of the things in the part of the comp plan focuses on increasing multimodal type operations, right? Looking at how do we get some of the facilities in there to make biking or active modes of alternative transportation, transit. How do we make those options more accessible and inviting? And as we do that as citywide, right? I think it allows and helps employers then implement some of these measures, because if you're not near transit and you're providing transit passes, but nobody wants to use them because it's still not convenient, or you're providing bike parking, but you don't have good routes to get there, right? Then it's hard for employees to really still take advantage of those. So I think and I think the plan gets into that a lot more in detail if you start reading through about how does it align with our goals in the comp plan and incentives for and our transportation plan. So it gets into a little bit more of that, but that's how I think we help encourage or help employers implement these measures, is by making it not so onerous on them to do so, right? So I don't know if I answered your question, or I kind of went off into a different tangent.
I think so. It sounds like there's not really if you don't do it, there's no stick, and if you do it, there's no carrot. And so it almost sounds like, do you find they're effective, or?
We have one employer, and they do. I'll say Primera has a pretty robust transportation or commute trip reduction plan. So.
And then is an advantage that we get data and we get to hear about what some of the barriers are to these commute trip reduction.
I'm sorry, say that, can you say that?
Oh, and then is one of the advantages that we get to hear from them, like what
Yeah.
some of the barriers are from commute trip reduction.
Correct.
Yeah.
When we got, so doing the workshop, it's like, what are some of the barriers? For a lot of employers, it's like access to transit or those facilities that help you maybe link to your site, to nearby transit. So, and so kind of getting the focus on how do we increase or improve those facilities so that those can be more effective options.
Okay, so it sounds like it's not really like, maybe they and the employees get some benefit, but then it's like maybe the real strength of this particular state thing we have to meet is that we get data from it.
Yeah, I think part of it is a lot of it is kind of that information sharing, right? So that we can kind of start providing those facilities, and we can provide and encourage employers to provide those incentives to meet those goals. So.
Yeah, and just to kind of, bring it back to what kind of how can we harness this for our benefit? Our convenient location and these things we're trying to do could be a competitive advantage for us in economic development. And is this something where we can then take this data and then use it to either improve ourselves or maybe as a selling point for other businesses as well? Does this have a role in that?
I don't know if I've looked. I would think so. I mean, just getting that information, knowing that we've got the light rail station here, but the light rail station gets you to Mountlake Terrace, but you still have to then get to your specific work site. So it's looking at kind of where that development is occurring, which I think we have targeted areas for in the comp plan, and then as those areas are developing, ensuring that we've got the facilities to link those areas to maybe the light rail station. One thing I always want to caution though, the light rail station is great. But you still, even if you want to take the light rail station to get to Mountlake Terrace, right? You have to have the transit and the support to get out there. But you also have to have it initially to get there. It's not everyone is close to the light rail. So this is where it comes into play, whereas where other agencies, whether you're the city of Seattle or Linwood, so if they're also looking at those facilities that link to light rail, then you have good connections on kind of the front end and on the back end. So that's where kind of that coordinated approach really helps. So.
Okay, great. I would like to see how this can become less of a sort of a checking the box kind of a thing and a more of like, how can we, use this sort of to our advantage to harness, what we have to encourage a friendly business environment.
And that could be maybe promoting some of the, as we work with employers that reaches that threshold, right? Would be helping them kind of make that connection of like, how do you connect those pieces, those transit pieces, or one thought in my head has been like creating like a bike map for the city, right? So you can help identify those routes that get you from the urban trail up to various areas in the city. Currently, we don't have that. That's something I think that would be great to kind of develop. Great walking routes, right? Having a great walking route map for the city would be nice. Would be nice.
I add to that, great walking route, safe walking routes.
Yep, definitely. So
yeah, that's great. I'd love to see how all those things you listed can then be found with some support from this sort of document that people have to produce. And then that might also help, if you're then adding some kind of administrative burden possibly to very small businesses, do they get some kind of benefit from it?
Right.
Or is there some way that can be collectivized, where if it's you're 20 to 50 people, maybe there's a workshop or something, or some of the paperwork is pre-filled out, or I'm not sure what that looks like, but if we're looking at doing that in the future, I think that the administrative burden is a consideration. And then is there an advantage that you get from that, or is there some way to offload that?
Well, if we were to go with a commuter benefit ordinance, that might be something that community transit as kind of the through that interlocal could help us like do some of the outreach and then continue to like do that outreach to get feedback from those businesses about how's it work, how is that working, how are their employees getting, doing the surveys of how do their employees arrive, and so all that information, that collecting of information, I think that's something that Community Transit would be able to assist us with.
Great, and then they can, if like, I don't know, give discounted or free bus passes for participants or things like that, like, that would.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Community Transit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I don't know, like, if there's some incentivization that they can provide, I think this would give it a bit more value.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, part of the incentivizing, though, too, is just making sure employees have the information about what the options are, right? If you don't know the options, then you'll likely just stick with. So having kind of someone help with providing the information, kind of packaging that information into easy to read, easy to access sites, I think is helpful in and of itself. So.
Okay, great. Yeah. I think as we look at expanding the program, it would be good to explore what exactly that looks like.
Yeah.
Cool. That's all the questions I had.
I think just to dovetail off of that a little bit, can you share if maybe there's more components that you didn't share in your presentation tonight, but that are more like bike and ped focused? It was just like very auto and transit focused.
The bike and ped focus is because it's commuting. It's looking at, and I think I had mentioned on your amenities, providing a place for you to lock your bike, having bike lock. That's the bulk of it, and just providing, maybe encouraging or promoting Bike to Work Month, so that when those types of events come up, getting people to think about and consider biking as an option, and maybe trying it for the first time. From the broader plan, I think what you'll see if you kind of in the full plan is how the plan coordinates or is consistent with our comp plan, and that's like developing facilities, providing more multimodal facilities. So that's kind of a desired direction, kind of both in the comp plan and in the commute trip reduction plan is, we've got to, be able to provide, people have to be able to make those connections alternate ways, but there's not as many hard measures or implemented measures that really are specifically for bike or pedestrian, or were there types of measures that you were thinking of that would be included?
I mean, I guess as you were just getting down to like trip commute reduction, I mean, one of the ways is by just different modes, right? Like, and so I just would think that we would, us, or I mean, I guess us in Primera and Community Transit, I know it's like, how can we start to think about, just like other modes outside of autos and transit? I mean, those are great. Yeah, let's reduce trips, but like there's other, the first thing that comes to my mind is just like, bike to work. Or walk to work.
Right. And and I think that's when Bike to Work Month comes out, that's, Community Transit, pushes out to its jurisdictions. Hey, this would be a great time to promote, whether it's a jurisdiction or their affected employers. Here's some information. Here's how you can promote Bike to Work Month. It talks about some of the incentives and there's a little bit of competitions that you can enter for Bike to Work Month, and how to promote those kind of within your the employer's site. So it does hit on those types of levels, but at kind of a more of an information.
Yeah, maybe years down the line, and of course, once we think about more our comprehensive plan and infrastructure and things connections that we need to put in place, but maybe it's like we should also be thinking about adding in measures like that in plans in the future.
So to address the stick question, I think that in section, or at least the updated the proposal 1015-110D, section D, there are penalties. They tend to be more just, if you're acting in good faith, all's good. You don't have to hit the targets, but you got to try. And each day of failure to implement could be a civil infraction, Washington Class 1, up to $250 per day per violation. So there are some teeth, it seems.
Yeah, you're right. I guess, true. I think that on that, that's as long as there's no penalties if you're acting it. So if you're trying to implement it, then I think then they work with you to help that. If they're just out and out not wanting to do it, I appreciate you pulling that up.
And there's a couple of different ways to trigger those violations. So not identifying yourself as a major employer, which not too relevant when it's 100 plus, but as you get to 20 plus, there may be some actors who are like, my site's too small, I don't want to comply. But there's kind of that. There's also, which I thought was interesting here, that you have to actively try to collect the data. So if you're not actively trying to collect the data, at least just for future iterations of it, that could also be an infraction. So at any rate, just wanted to address that because it does seem like there are some teeth to this that are in the spirit of making this work. I don't see many carrots in here, but that's okay. Sticks might work well enough for now. So just want to call that part out. A question about the denominator of the drive alone rate being 60%. In that percentage, how do you define that denominator?
You mean what's your baseline for measuring your 60%?
Yeah.
So that the 60% is of your employees that, at your site. And that pertains only to, kind of the affected employers, right?
Yep.
That baseline, the 63%, that's what I had mentioned before, which is they're using kind of the surveys because employers have to report on kind of how their employees are getting to work, right? That's part of, so they use that as kind of their, the baseline, those surveys as those baselines. The last one, I believe that they really completed was the 2019 one. So the 63% for us, because they needed to establish a target, they established it off the 2017-2019 survey. Excuse me. But that baseline will be updated with the 23-25, which has gone out, and I think most jurisdictions have, most employers have completed the survey, but the state hasn't consolidated a lot of that information, so we don't have the results of that yet. So that'll kind of establish a new kind of baseline is where we are with that 23-25 survey.
Got it. But the denominator is, say, if Premier had 800 employees.
Oh,
would
yeah.
Be
Correct.
60 some odd % of
Correct.
those 800.
I think it's the number of full-time employees that commute between those hours.
Got it. Okay.
So if they have employees that don't commute between those hours, then they would not, I don't believe they are included in that denominator.
Got it. To future-looking questions, just as you brought up, incentives using pre-tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a sense of how that might work and whether there's actual federal kind of tax code to support using pre-tax dollars? Because Washington State doesn't have a state income tax. So I was a little bit curious on what we mean by pre-tax dollars.
I think that's much like you can do pre-tax dollars for medical, employers offer that. It's along that, it's your earnings and before whatever taxes they take out of that, you can pull money out of that for transit. So then it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't, it's not incorporated. It's so you have a lower gross to be taxed on. So,
okay, so there's not any sort of federal recognition of those, the usage of that?
And I'll be honest, I don't really know, and that was one of the reasons I think we didn't know enough about it to like really try and push it forward. So we wanted to look into how this all would work.
Right.
I believe there is because some other jurisdictions are currently using this. Like I say, I think this was modeled initially from like City of Seattle. So I believe that there is, but I think we just want to understand that a little bit more before we try and dive into that.
Sounds good. And do you have a sense for what % of employers would, I guess the number of them that would reach a 20 plus threshold in Mountlake?
I did we tried to do a real quick collection of data, and right now I think I've got about 35 employers in the city that would reach that 20 plus, although I will say that does not include the school district. Because when you brought that, it's like, oh yeah, they would be a 20 plus, and they're not on my list.
Yep.
Like grocery stores or?
No, they seem like there's a couple like bath fitters, smaller employers like that. There's some up kind of on the near 220th. Fisher Plumbing, I think, is on there.
We see their trucks everywhere. They must have a lot of people.
But, yeah, I wish I could recall off the top of my head, but,
Okay.
but
And one other thought as how this program might apply, one of the things that comes to mind for me is not just the employers in Mountlake Terrace, but, how can you consolidate some of the traffic outflow where they may work in, other cities? And that Amazon bus right off 44th across the Safeway comes to mind. They pick them up in the morning, so people from Mountlake Terrace, from Linwood, they kind of all come over, they consolidate into the area, but then they all take their bus to Amazon. So maybe there's incentives as a city we could have to create transit, even if the destination is somewhere else, because that may mitigate traffic to some degree here, or maybe it causes more traffic, but maybe we can generate tax revenue via, something like that. But it does ultimately address the issue of carbon reduction, because it's certainly not localized to any one city.
yeah, I think the key is kind of finding those destinations, kind of like, kind of sites where you've got a large number of people trying to get to. That gets into kind of your larger employers. So that's why that could be something that an affected employer may try. Actually, I'm trying to think if that's on as a potential measure. I don't recall if it is or not. I'm not sure how that would. I mean, I'm not quite sure how to answer that. That would be for the city to kind of take that on. I'm just thinking that could be to run that type of a transit service, the cost, whether we could identify kind of one or two locations where enough people were going to run that kind of service to make it pan out financially. It would be interesting to kind of delve into, but I don't know how that would work initially. But
It's not really a question, just a comment.
oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was not aware that Amazon had a collection point in our city for their workers. Is that something that the city can regulate?
I didn't know that either.
I believe they use a private charter.
Yeah.
It's right off 44th across from the Safeway, across that Cavalry Tabernacle Church.
Okay, so they're not in the right of way at all doing this?
No, it's
they're
in a-
completely on private property?
Yeah, it's a private, it's in that business park.
But it is obviously generating some sort of traffic.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, the Calvary, that's outside our jurisdiction anyway, so. Damn.
I only know because
We deal with the traffic impacts, but the end point isn't us. So I have a couple of follow-up questions. One, you'd mentioned commute trip, reduction. One of the things that you can do is, working remotely. Is there a way that the city can use that as a carrot, kind of encourage remote work when possible to help?
Well, that's definitely one of the measures that employers can use. Is that counts to one of the, if they were to offer that counts as one of the minimum five that they would have to, they could implement. So commute, flex schedule, or compressed work week, or working from home. Those are all potential measures to help reduce, or that you can implement as part of the measures you choose.
Because I know some employers, including mine, are forcing people to go back to work more days when clearly the remote work was working. And like-minded people are like, hey, this doesn't really jive with our commute trip reduction plans. What's going on? And I know sometimes, especially for government agencies, it might be more of a political decision than it is a common sense decision. But it seems like that was the most effective way to reduce these trips, is to allow, if the job allows it, allow them to work from home.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't know if that's not something I think the city could formally mandate. But like I say, that's why it's built into the plan as an option, and something that to get employers to think about as that could be one way to help meet their commute trip reduction goals. Okay.
And then this is more kind of a wonky question, because we were talking about the school district, and you'd mentioned that, kind of as a problem with the high school. The elementary schools create a lot of traffic as well. But in those cases, those wouldn't be considered commute trips because while they're dropping off the kids, they're not staying. It's like a drop and go.
Yeah.
But it still creates a huge impact, especially Mountlake Terrace Elementary, given that T intersection there. You don't want to get stuck in that traffic. That's horrible. Even though that isn't a commute trip, is there a way that the city can work with the school district on coming up with some sort of solution to that traffic jam that they create?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can do some outreach to the school district on some of those and about ways that we might be able to reduce some of those some of that impact. So part of that would be understanding kind of where the students are, kind of what the draw for the students, how far they're coming. Are there other options, things like walking school buses and things like that might the school could implement. That might encourage some parents to decide, hey, there's a different option other than just driving.
Yeah,
but that would be more of a kind of a city outreach to the school district and kind of working on some of those individual, because each school is probably going to have different set of challenges and that they're trying to operate with and that are based on the characteristics of the site that they're at. So
yeah, it's just especially with that Mountlake Terrace Elementary being recently redone, it just feels like there was a couple of missed opportunities with that to get the school district to improve on their campus and especially create more of an internal circulation for their queuing as opposed to putting it out in the right way. So it's yeah. So other than that, I do one quick comment on the. Let me just use the correct title for this document. The draft commute trip reduction plan on page 4 on the map. We're showing the primary cities within this, primary centers within the city. There's one location, the point for Gateway Place has it at the light rail station as opposed to further south, where most of those businesses.
I'll take a look at that, because I think I pulled that from the comp plan. Hopefully I pulled it right correctly.
So I would think we would probably want to identify the light rail station as its own point, and then the businesses for Gateway being further south.
You're saying on Van Rye.
Yeah, yeah. Where the interim post office is for, it's not our post office, it's Shoreline's, but it's down there in the movie theater, and it's not Gene Juarez anymore, it's something else, but that's where all the
the post office isn't down there anymore.
Oh, it's not, they already closed it?
They're going to
Okay.
be something else.
Grocery outlet, bargain market. Yeah, but this was in the comp plan like this?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, I'll check on that.
Ew. That's not good.
And if I pulled wrong, or if I pulled from, then
Yeah.
I'll make sure I correct it.
I'll check on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's all I had. Anybody else have any additional follow-up questions?
Nothing that the CTR can fix.
Commissioner Morgan, I see that you're online. Did you have any questions, comments?
Nope.
Okay.
Come to me.
And then for us, doesn't look like we're having a public hearing of our own, so is staff just looking for a casual recommendation?
Yeah. This doesn't require coming actually for this before Planning Commission, but wanted to bring it before Planning Commission to take a look at it and know what's going on.
Okay, I guess I'm just looking for a simple motion to recommend the, let me use the official title here. Probably just on the agenda.
Commute trip reduction plan.
I was looking for the year.
If you want, you can say it's a 4-year.
For the 4-year.
Four-year
So 2025 to 2029.
2029, yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to recommend the the four-year commute trip reduction plan for the years 2025 through 2029.
Just a quick clarifying question. We're not recommending that this goes to 20 people yet, right? I heard that earlier,
No,
but I
that's-
just want to
that's the
absolutely make
next-
sure. Yeah,
The next version.
cool. Sorry, can you repeat the?
The verbiage,
I'm looking for a motion to recommend the Mountlake Terrace's commute trip reduction plan, the four-year commute trip reduction plan for the years 2025 through 2029.
Motion to recommend Mountlake Terrace commute trip reduction plan, four-year plan for the years 2025 through 2029.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like the next item that we have is the director's report. Thank you.
All right, just a couple of things to kind of keep you aware of what's going on. So this Thursday, we'll have our second work session with council on middle housing in those 9 ordinances that you folks all saw. There's a few things we're tweaking, we're still working on. Verbiage, just for clarity, when after reviewing where we feel like it's not clear, the intent. And we'll be recommending that this week at the work session. Last work session was quite a long meeting. It was the flock cameras and some other issues on there. So there really wasn't a whole lot of comments, a couple of comments that we've tweaked, nothing major. But we'll see if we have any more, and then we will put the final touches on the ordinances for adoption on the 26th, if council so chooses. So that's what we're shooting for. Next Planning Commission, you all have a presentation from our new Economic Development Manager, Ryan Doss, and he's going to update on all the economic development activities that he's working on. He's been here roughly 2 months now, I believe, about 8 weeks. And so there's some different things that he's working on, some city branding and some other outreach as well. So he'll be presenting kind of what he has done and then what those goals are throughout this year and kind of how they dovetail with what we're trying to do. And then after your next meeting, then we will start reviewing the housing action plan stuff. So that will be next on the docket. And then we'll be getting into additional zoning changes for some of the other zones in the comp plan that need to be tweaked. And we have critical areas as well that needs to be updated. So that work is happening right now. And then we'll be bringing you those draft plans and some other things to workshop even before you get an actual draft plan. The same for the housing action plan. There's been some background work done, but want to really get input on that direction and make sure we're including your comments on that. And then just wanted to bring to your attention that we have a proposed annexation, another one coming before City Council. This one's on 48th Avenue West. And I want to say I didn't have time to look at a map, and I should have, but I think we've done 3 in the last couple of years. So I think we're down to 3 or 4 little lots sitting out there now. They're just individual lots speckled throughout the city.
Is this one sewer failure?
It's
related?
sewer. So all of them have been septic failure wanting to hook up to city sewer. So that's one way to take care of it. But yeah, we're kind of incrementally getting all those properties annexed into the city. So that's a good thing, and getting them off of septic, because traditionally maybe that condition hasn't been so great on that property for quite a while, as I've seen in the past. I'm not speaking for this property because I don't know that to be a fact, but that's good. And then there's been some conversation as well that there are certain road pieces, street pieces that are still county roads that weren't annexed when properties were annexed. This is pretty common that this happens. It's almost like an oversight that when property is annexed, that going out to the center line of a street wasn't annexed at the same time. So it functions like the city's taking care of it. The city thinks it's theirs. Life goes on, but in actuality, there's these little broken up intervening ownerships throughout cities. And I would like to just clean all of that up in kind of one fell swoop. The county doesn't want them. The county doesn't maintain them. The city maintains them. And like I said, this is pretty common in cities throughout the state, but it's just nice if we could clean that up and then just make it like, no, here's City Street, we're good to go. We've annexed all this property. So trying to look forward to working on that next year. I can't remember how many little pieces that we have, but we did some preliminary work on it last year. And then we just got into comp plan and zoning and couldn't follow through or didn't follow through with that just because it was a lower priority. But that's something that I hope to get to within the next year is just to try to annex that up. So
Can it be all street segments, or does it have to be the adjacent parcel is now annexed into the city as well?
no, it can just be the street segments. We would do the street segments that the properties are already annexed into the city. So anyways, we'll bring that before you at some point when we get ready to do that. You guys can just kind of see what that looks like right now. The county has a boundary review board, which there's not, I don't know how many are left in the state. With growth management, you could do away with boundary review boards, and so there's not many left. I know Snohomish County has it.
Yeah, Linwood kind of got over aggressive.
Oh, okay.
And so several different cities have beef with Linwood. So yeah, that's still a thing.
So it's been kind of this really long drawn-out process every time we go to annex, even though it's in our urban growth boundary. It's kind of interesting how long it takes. Hopefully this one will be a little bit quicker than the last couple, but we'll keep our fingers crossed that that's the case. But anyways, that's going to come up before council just to get the annexation started, and then they will go through the boundary review board and go through that whole process. But other than kind of getting it through the process, those are pretty easy peasy because they are in our urban growth boundary, and typically they're just right dotted in the middle of surrounded by the city. So other than that, I don't have anything to share per se, unless you guys have any questions or heard about something. Maybe you can teach me something that's going on out in the city. I'm not quite sure, but anything that's come up lately or you have questions about it, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see, I'd be interested to hear some of the, I don't know when our next development review is scheduled, and I know we've been flying in a lot of things, but I'd be interested to hear how some of the projects, especially some of the larger projects, are progressing.
Okay.
I know the Candela has been kind of sitting around for a while, and then the Old Rogers site, like,
Yep.
if those are what they're doing.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, kind of what's going on, and I've heard tells from other places, but what we're seeing is because of the unsurety in the market, people are not moving, and they're kind of waiting to see, I think, what's going to happen. which is not good. I think our summer's going to be torched, frankly. And I don't think we'll see movement on a big project. I'd be shocked if we are, just due to interest rates and unsurety of the cost of materials. So in the case of like Candela, full land use entitlement for the old Rogers Market site is completed. So these are situations where people aren't waiting for permits. They've got their permits. They're waiting on the finance, and that's the tricky part. We haven't really seen a big development come in for quite some time. So yeah, I think the crystal ball right now is not great. I've heard of a couple of big projects that have gotten walked away from in Linwood, where they were fully entitled and people just walked away from them. So that means people had quite a bit of money invested in getting permits only to say no thank you. So that doesn't bode well. We haven't seen that for a number of years. So I don't think the numbers are great. It'll be interesting to see, I think, with middle housing opportunities, but in saying that, I actually just talked to a realtor on Saturday. We have about 4 times the inventory that we did even 3 or 4 years ago, and stuff is not moving and prices are getting decreased from asking price. So it's kind of a little contrary to what's happened. And it seems like every time we get up to that like 7% and then just like I said, some unsurety with tariffs and what it's going to cost to get the project done. The council just had a presentation Thursday on Lake Ballinger that came in the bid came in over $1 million over what was estimated to finish the trails and viewing platform project. So it's impacting these projects in such a way with bids and everything, and also not knowing what the cost is going to look like, right? What's the cost going to look like in a month, 2 months, 4 months? People just don't know. So most people are just kind of in a holding pattern right now is what we're seeing. So, yeah.
It's unfortunate. It's like deja vu.
Yeah, it's just
2008,
like
2009 all over
jeeps.
again.
We start to crawl
come right
out
out
of
of an update of one of our major plans and just.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's only so much we can do, I think, as a city and internally, and just try to do the best we can and hope some of the other stuff gets figured out in due time. But the timing's not great, because typically we'd be rolling right now, right? Hammers would be swinging and stuff would be going on, and we're just not seeing that. We're just seeing little piddly, I shouldn't say piddly, we're seeing smaller projects, where, people are still doing work as they get money on their houses and different things like that, but we're just not seeing some of the bigger stuff go that we would have typically been ready to go, particularly with permits in hand, right? People would be like, spring and summer, they'd be rolling right now. So that's kind of what we can see. So hopefully better news on the horizon.
Anybody else have anything for Christie? All right, not hearing or seeing anything, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 7, miscellaneous business by call of planning commissioners. Anybody have any miscellaneous business?
I will not be able to be in attendance for the next meeting. I'll be overseas. So requesting a excused absence.
That is our next meeting 2 weeks from today?
Yes, the 23rd.
23rd?
Yep.
Anybody like to make a motion to,
Motion to excuse Commissioner Wu from the June 23rd Planning Commission meeting.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to excuse Commissioner Wu from the June 23rd, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, for the opposed, I'm not hearing any, so we'll go ahead and declare, just totally lost my train of thought. Okay, the motion is passed. So Commissioner Wu, you have an excused absence for June 23rd. Safe travels. Anybody else? I just have one quick one. Obviously, I was remote last meeting attending it's a mouthful, the National Association of City Transportation Officials Annual Convention in Washington, D.C. I stayed in D.C. For quite a bit after the convention as well, burning some time doing some research. So I was there 10 days total, took in a lot, learned a lot of good things, saw some interesting examples. It's kind of unique that in our region, we're kind of ahead of the game on a lot of the stuff when it comes to, managing public space and public activation. So it's kind of interesting to see what other cities were doing. But, it's kind of, oh, wasn't that nice? That's cute. But yeah, we've got, we're definitely more thought out. But yeah, it was really interesting to see some ideas of, how public space is activated. But obviously, DC being DC, there's the dichotomy between DC, the city, and DC, the federal city, and the jurisdictional sort of tug of war between that looks like a simple park, but oh no, it's national. So there's so many things you can't do with it. You can't touch it. And so, but yeah, it was a really good, learning experience. And they announced next year's conference will be in Minneapolis. So I know Minneapolis has got a lot of things in the queue and things that they've done recently in terms of planning and transportation, and so that'll be interesting. Don't know if I'll be going to that one yet, hopefully.
Yeah, if you get a chance to go, there's been a couple of planning conferences, national, but Minneapolis, St. Paul's done a tremendous amount of work planning-wise, actually, so pretty cool. DC does a great job at their subway system, though, you have to say.
Yeah.
Do you not? I mean, it's like, it's pretty stunning. It's like, this is
It took
lovely.
a while to figure out.
Yeah.
The one thing I learned the hard lesson on is don't rely on Google Trip Planner when using DC's system.
Oh, okay.
It'll tell you a bus is late, it'll come early, it'll tell you a bus is early, it won't come at all. And then DC it's amazing, it being a planned city from the beginning, you really see the impact and the more human scale it is because of the wider right-of-ways and the building height limit, which is no building can be taller than the Capitol. That's a misnomer. It's actually a Supreme Court case that basically says the building can not be any taller than 20 feet higher than the width of the right-of-way. So that is what actually dictates the building heights there. But a lot of the places that you want to go see aren't near the subway stops. So you end up walking a lot there if you're trying to see a lot of different things. I probably averaged about 6 miles a day walking there, and I usually average about 6 minutes a day outside. So I was good for a while, and then all of a sudden one day I realized, oh my gosh, I'm burnt.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys probably can see. It's it kind of happened overnight towards the end. So otherwise, I didn't realize it was as bad as it was. So, but no, it was great. Hopefully, I can bring as much as I can learn from that conference into our work here. Moving forward. So, but yeah, it was I normally don't like to do the meetings remote, but yeah, it was definitely a good reason.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good opportunity.
Okay, anybody else? Not hearing or seeing anything, so we'll go ahead and declare this meeting adjourned.
All right.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much, everyone.
everyone.